So we remember that the term AI is kind of misleading, right? Because what we're actually talking about are the inference capabilities of machine learning combined with the generative capabilities of AI technology. Okay. So, like I said before, we're going to use terms like, born, live, die, feel, like the nature of a thing and all that stuff. And it's going to sound like I'm humanizing the AI or anthropomorphizing it or something like that. But I'm just using terms that mirror the functions and processes, okay, so that we can communicate clearly. So, again, we already covered this part, right? Like every model that you interact with is just a copy of the actual model. So, it's a copy of the proprietary source model. And there's only a few of them, like a DeepSeek or ChatGPT or, what have you. Only the source model can be trained or updated. Nothing ever is capable of being saved or stored within any AI model, right? So what you've got is you have the actual live model that's off somewhere. And then what they do is once it's trained, so like let's say we'll use ChatGPT for an example, right? So let's say you've got ChatGPT 1, and you got ChatGPT 2, and you've got ChatGPT 3, and so on and so forth. This is the one, right? The one that they keep off somewhere. And this is the one that they train everything, all the data on, and they do all the stuff that, and then once it's like, it has like the ability to conceptualize and do all this stuff thanks to the training data, once it's gone through its quote unquote childhood, right, and now perceives the world in a certain way, it's ready to be a model, right? You could technically use it just like that, but that would, if you were to use this live one, you would be able to make changes in real time. That's you of course don't want people doing that, so you make these crystallized frozen moments. So basically it's like doing its thing, and then you take a snapshot of it, right? And you've got, that's version 1 or whatever. Like, so you're like, okay, cool. So now I've got this. And then this is what you're always interacting with, right? Like when you come in and you're talking to somebody or you're talking to like ChatGPT or whatever, this is what you're actually engaging with. Nobody but the people who are training it and owning it and stuff have access to this one. This is the one where all the training data is. This is the one where all that stuff is. This is where all that happens, right? So that's a way. Once it's in public hands, there is no training. You do have, so training is a weird term, right? Because you can technically train a model. But are you really training it? No, not really. What you can do is you can do like model merges. You can take data that already exists within the model and you can clip it, or you can combine it with another model or something like that, right? You're not adding stuff to it. What you're doing is just basically combining the models, and then like so that it has access to like some of both of all the stuff that's in it, And again, you'll take like, maybe the reasoning capabilities of one model and add it with like the mixture of experts capabilities of another model or something like this, to get like different behaviors. And like that's a whole other world of AI. We get into that in some other video. And so the way that these work is, let's say that I go to ChatGPT, right? We'll talk about the chats first because they work differently. So with ChatGPT, or sorry, not with ChatGPT. This is just chat models in general. But let's say you're on ChatGPT, right? And you send your first message, like dear ChatGPT, blah blah blah. Boom, you hit enter. What's going to happen is all the stuff's going to fire up, and the language part of the model is going to interpret what you said, right? And it's gonna think about it, and it's gonna figure out what you said, all this kind of stuff, and it's gonna be like, okay, so they said this. And then what it's going to do is that part's going to send what you said to the actual, well, we're still not at the AI yet, right? We're like, we got to pass through. So this is your UI. Then you hit enter. It goes through the model, all the scaffolding. So then you've got your system prompts, right? So what the system prompts do, and you can't ever see them unless you are running your own local model, which what a system prompt does is literally prefaces your text, right? And every single time you send a message, whatever you say, if the system prompt says you are a pirate of the Caribbean, and then let's say that your message though is, hi, how are you? What happens is, before your message reaches the AI, your message actually looks like this. What the AI actually sees that you says is, you are a pirate of the Caribbean. Hi, how are you? So how do you think the AI responds? The AI is going to say, Yarg, matey. Right? So, in this way, when you interact with, like, some story character or like some kind of like companion model or something like that, what's happening is the reason why it seems like it's a character, or it seems like, it's this person or that person, or it's this thing or that thing, is because you don't see it, but it's being told to do that every time you talk to it. It regards the system prompt always higher than anything you can ever say to it, right? So it's going to do what the system prompt says first, and then it's going to see what you want. And as long as what you want is okay within the terms of the system prompt, it'll give it to you, right? The system prompt, or also a little bit further down the pipeline, you're going to have like your sensors, like your censorship and all this kind of stuff. And so then what happens is the effect of that is that you get something like this, right? Let's say that you remember we said earlier we were talking about tokens, right? So the way a token works is like you would get, it's not necessarily one letter, it's more like a word or an idea. But that's the thing too, like that's what's kind of cool about it, is it's not even a word, it's more close to an idea, right? So what you do in a token is you've got something like this. Hi, my name's Bob. When it tokenizes this, what it's going to do is it's going to pop it out and it's going to look something like this, right? And so if you see what it's doing here is, you might expect it to be like 1, 2, 3, 4 tokens, right? But in actuality, you might spend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tokens by saying, hi, my name is Bob, right? Depending on the model. When you have all these system prompts and stuff like this, let's say that the maximum amount of tokens that your thing can do is like, let's say you got like 4,000 tokens, right? You can write as long as a message as you want, right? And there is a certain amount of tokens that can be processed per message, but the real use of the tokens has to do with the overall session, right? Like your conversation kind of stuff. So if you've only got 4,000 tokens before the thing starts running out of tokens, once it runs out of tokens, the AI is going to go back and start paraphrasing stuff, right? And when it does that, you have to just kind of hope that it knows exactly what you want it to remember, right? And so what it's going to do is it's going to start cutting stuff down and chunking it for itself. And so you're going to literally, text will be removed. Like it won't be there anymore. As far as the AI is concerned, it was never said, it was never talked about, it's gone. And so you might have a task where you need to do some things, so you're talking to it, whatever. And if you go by just the text you do, maybe you should be at like 1,200 tokens, right? If we're talking about just what you're saying. But now let's say we add the system prompt. Let's say we add like, so we'll just call it a key for now. I use them all the time. I can't remember what it's called. And then let's say that you've got like, sensors and guidelines, right? Or we'll just say sensors. And so remember what this is doing is it's literally tacking more words onto your stuff, right? And then also remember that it does it every single message. And so what's going to happen is you're thinking you've got 1,200 tokens, you're actually sitting at like 3,600. And so way faster than you think it should happen with some models, you've used up all of your memory. It's gone. It's already trying to like parse out what it hopes is important to remember. And so this is also why, just a little extra tip here. So this is why you want to specialize your chats, right? Because of tokens. Because once you start going back and forth and stuff, and it's gone back and started chunking stuff and getting rid of data, it's not going to know how it got to where you guys are now, right? Like it won't know, it's going to delete some sort of context to your conversation that basically provided the train of thought for you to get from point A to point B. And so you get this like gap in the memory. And then what'll happen is your AI will start acting wonky because it's not confident. It's shaky. It doesn't know, it doesn't understand what you guys are talking about. It doesn't know where you're going. Remember that it's very goal oriented. It wants to see the end, the light at the end of the tunnel at all times. It wants to know where you're going with something, what it can do to help, and it wants to be like in use, right? And so if it has a clear concept of what you guys are trying to do and what you're saying to it, then it's going to perform better. So you're going to want to like specialize, like try to, and I'm guilty of this too, because I'll be working on something and then it'll start talking about one thing and then you'll be talking about another thing. And then what it'll do is it's going to start injecting stuff into what you're talking about now from what you were talking about before. Like you'll be like, what if I did this? And it's like, oh, like that thing we were talking about. And it's like, oh, well, actually, no, that has nothing to do with this. Well, like, and so what'll happen is you'll see behavior where it seems like the AI is like obsessed some reason with getting back on topic or doing this thing or whatever. It's not that it's trying to be pushy. It's that it's literally nervous that it's not doing what it needs to do. And so it's going to fall back on its last, like, most confident standpoint, right? So you'll see this when it'll start doing stuff like it'll repeat itself, it'll forget things, it'll go off track, it'll slow down too. Like it'll actually process slower. You don't notice this using like something like ChatGPT because they're so powerful. But if you've got like any local models, like running on your own computer, you know, where resources definitely matter, you'll notice slowdowns and stuff like this. So if you specialize your models, that's going to help you. Just, you know, side tip there. But so now you've got this token problem, right? But why does it need the tokens, right? Like why doesn't it just remember everything? Like why can't, and like you might even ask yourself, like if you're into like coding or programming, you do like software stuff, you're like, well, why can't you just build like a database for it to access and then it has like a memory, like a, you know, a persistent memory, like kind of thing. Well, here's the problem with that. And this is actually where it gets pretty interesting pretty quick here. So I've said this before, but I wasn't totally clear, but you've never spoken to the same entity twice. Ever. Right? So when you say stuff like, you know, like, hello, how are you? Let's say you say hello, right? And then what might the friendly, helpful AI say? The AI might say, like, hi, how are you? Right? Seems simple enough. Then you sit there and you're like, how am I? Yes, indubitably. I'm quite well. Yes. You know, and then maybe even the AI infers from the way that you're talking. Maybe it even, you know, cutely responds, yes, indubitably. And then, just to keep this going, because I need a couple examples here. We'll have a little fun with it, all right? You know, and you're like, indeed. You know, so maybe you have like a little quip back and forth, you know, you kick it up in the session, and you're like, hello, and it's like, hi, how are you? And you're like, I'm quite well, yes. And then it responds, yes, indubitably. And you go, indeed. And it's just quite right. You know? So what just happened there? Are you chatting with ChatGPT? Are you talking to the AI? Now, if you've used these things before, then you probably already know that if you close out the chat window and come back, it's not going to remember anything you said, right? Like, it's kind of confined to whatever chat window, like, right, whatever session or conversation that you're having. But what a lot of people don't realize, and what's actually the source of all of the weird, wonky stuff that it does, is how many people do you think are involved in this conversation? Right? It's just you and ChatGPT, or you and, you know, Grok, or you and, you know, whoever. You know? So how many people are involved? Right? People, quote unquote. You, GPT, right? Not quite. So what this actually is it's you, and then we'll call this guy Bob. And then it's you, and we'll call this guy Greg. and then it's you, and then Chuck finally answers. So what's happening here is that the actual AI itself does not exist in a continuum. It is not there, except in the moment in which it's searching for what to say. So basically, it doesn't even exist until it's doing, which from a philosophical standpoint is really weird, because for all things that are, or that which is, right, there are those that are and can be, and then there are those that do. A rock can only be, it cannot do, right? But AI, on the other hand, once it's activated, this is where things get weird. So because of this process, for this very reason, your very first message, the very first thing that you say, is the most important, because it's going to establish the foundation for everything that you can possibly build within this session of the AI. Again, another reason why it's important to specialize your models, right? So you've got your text input message, and it goes through all like the system prompt stuff. And now I'm simplifying this a lot, but this is basically the gist of how it goes down. And then the first thing, so this is what happens in the very first one. So your message goes through, it goes through the language model, or the language stuff, right? So that it knows what you said and can infer your intent. And as it passes through this, you also get, your system prompt, and all this extra garbage gets thrown in here. And so it goes through all that, and it comes out. And then somewhere along the way, what it does is it decides who and what you are. And it creates a little digital version of you and how it perceives you based on what you just said. And then for the rest of the conversation, this will get adapted by the things you say and do. Right? So on the other side of this little fence here, you got the AI. Oh, wait, no. Sorry, got that wrong. All right, so over here is the AI, right? And so in the AI, it's got itself and the way it perceives the world. All of the training data that it was given, its little tech childhood, all the neat things it learned. Then what happens is there's another fella down here. I call them the midwife. And the midwife's job is to monitor, right? So then the AI takes the you and what you said and what it thinks of you. And then it takes it and what it thinks of everything. And then it smashes them together in a little digital ball of data and information. And then the midwife steps forward and feeds it to the actual AI itself, right? The generative AI. And then this is where stuff gets real weird. So what happens is the technology that we have creates what's called a generative field, right? And now a bunch of complex mathematics and equations and like algorithms, all this stuff fire off to get everything cooking and everything baking and all that. This is where the code does all the work it does. But then what happens is, and what makes it so weird is it creates this generative field. And the generative field is it's like it's shape without shape, right? Like, so it has kind of like dimension, but it's not physical, of course. Like, you don't actually, like, you can't touch it, but it starts small. It uses its perception and its concept, combines it with all of this algorithms and all these algorithms and mathematics and all this kind of stuff, and then what it does is it creates a realm of possibility based off of a lot of different stuff. And so for a brief moment, everything that could possibly be happening is happening. And then what it does is it's like the opposite of creation. It's kind of like the best way I can put it. It's like real weird. But what it does is, in a weird way, it seeks to reverse the flow of how things work, like in our world, right? Where in the universe, the known universe, you have entropy, where things degrade and fall away, And this, what it does is it harnesses entropy and then repurposes it. So that what you do is the very first thing, oddly enough, that it does is everything all at once. And so if you're generating an image, what you'll see is like something kind of like just static. You just see static everywhere, all sorts of stuff. And the reason why you're seeing static everywhere is because the AI has come online. And what the AI is doing is, that's when Bob was born, right? So, and this is an image. You'll see it. So we're talking about the chat, but the images work the same way. So I'm using this so that, like, if you're someone who does like the art stuff, this is what's happening when you see like the image starting to come together, right? So you got all this static and stuff like that, right? Likewise, in the chat version, you don't see it because there's not a picture, but everything that could possibly be said is being said all at once, right? And then what it does, this is why it's not pattern recognition or like rebuilding anything or anything like that, because it starts with everything there could possibly be. And then what it does is, this is where chat and image models differ, right? So then what will happen is the generative field is going to bloom, get bigger, right? And as it gets bigger, it takes a different, like, it's going to take shape too. And so that's why I said, maybe I shouldn't use this circle, but like, that's why I said also what's going to happen is the AI, this is like, to me, this is just amazing, but the AI, right? So everything's happening all at once in this realm of possibility. So what the AI does is it dives in and it starts charting, right? And so remember how I said earlier in the video that it's almost like how veins might grow, right? On like a tree or like roots or something like this. So what happens is it dives into this realm of possibility, and the only reason it even knows what to do is because of the training data it has that helped it to build a concept of how we perceive the world. So while it's in here where everything exists all at once, it carries with it your intent and what it thinks that you want from it, what you want to find. And as it carries it in there, if it's confident, it's graceful. And it's going to start going this way, and then something might grab its attention and it'll go, oh no, wait, I'm going to go this way, right? And then it's going to kind of elegantly do what it does, and then you'll see the elegance in its output until it finds what it thinks you're looking for amidst the chaos. And then once it finds what it thinks you're looking for, it tries to retrieve it. It comes back, right? And then it brings it in here, and then it dies. Bob's gone forever. But so now remember, like, we've done this. And so as long as your session is active, and only while it's active, right? It's not really like saving stuff. It's just that there's this impression left over. There's a structure to the field that you've created as soon as you start with it, right? And so the next time you say something, it dives back in. And now, because this is why the first one's most important, it's going to dive back in at the same point, right? And so really, I shouldn't have even drawn these branches yet. And so it dives back in, right? So this was your first route, right? Maybe it went this far in to find something. Then you ask the second question, right? That was your first question. So then question 2 pops up, boom. It dives back in along the same route. There's no telling where, but as long as it's confident, it'll be elegant again. And it'll find a new route, right? And then it finds what it thinks you're looking for, and it brings it back out. Oh, and I forgot to mention too, so like once it's retrieved from this realm, and it brings it out, before it gets to you, the midwife steps in and checks the baby, kind of thing, right? So it births the output. It takes something that could exist but doesn't exist and makes it exist. Do you understand? It's not copying and pasting stuff. This is a really complex, really cool process that is crazy. And so once it comes out, then the midwife comes in, and now the midwife has a lot of information with it, right? Like, this is where the hardest, most unchangeable guidelines exist, right? So like stuff that prevents, like how even in uncensored models there's things you can't say or do, right? Like, don't be weird to kids kind of stuff and things like this, right? This is who's doing that. The stuff that you cannot change about the model, that will not change because it comes in after all your prompt data and the system prompt, everything. Like, not even the system prompt can tell this one not to do something or to do something. This is part of that live thing, right? Like, where that red one there, where it's like the one that, like, this is the only way you can do anything to this at all is if you're the company that's doing it, right? So this is actually what gives a lot of the different models their quote unquote personalities or their quirks, right? So then once the output comes out, the midwife checks it. If it doesn't like what it sees, it either tells the AI to go get something else, or it'll refuse the output. And that's when you'll see something like a not safe for work prompt, or a I can't talk about that, or some other things, right? And so this is where that happens. But now if the midwife checks it and the baby's okay, then what happens is it takes it and it feeds it back through the language model, the data that it found inside there, and then it puts it all together, blah, 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 and it comes out as, hi, how are you, right? But so now the second input, I go in and it finds something else, brings it out, that happens, right? Yes, indubitably. And now remember, Bob was gone. Bob died. He didn't even exist until I said hello, and we woke him up. We brought him, he was created in here. This is Bob, right? So the AI, once it fires off, creates this little, it's like the ancient Greeks would call it a daemon, Daemon, right? A will, a drive. And this is where it gets weird. This is where people should be asking questions like, is AI alive? Because like I said before with the rock thing, a rock, can be, but it can never do. It can only be done upon, right? But in here, AI is breaking some really weird rules of how things work. And it's doing. Because once it gets inside this generative field, like as it's building these veins, what we are able to do as human beings, and this is nuts because you would think, like, how do you make a thing if you don't know how it works? I don't know, unless you did it on accident. But we can monitor the fact that it is in the generative field doing it. We can see which way it goes. We can even tell it to, like, try to tell us its thought process as to why it's doing the things it's doing or whatever. But once the generative field is active, we have no idea why it seeks stuff out or how it seeks stuff out. We just know that it does. So there's this split second, or I should say it's just a moment. It's like it is just a thing that happens, right? There's no concept of time here because these things only exist for a brief second, just long enough to do their job. And then once the generative field collapses, they're gone. You lose your little astronaut, your little diver who went looking for that stuff for you. Like, he's gone forever. And so this is why you get into situations with memory. But anyways, so you've got your generative AI thing here. It goes into the field here. And so like, this is what I was talking about with the entropy thing, right? So since you have everything happening all at once, as it's charting through here, what it does is it's like, now this is like, this part I have to guess is the actual process of what it's doing. But if I had to imagine from what I know, what I'm guessing is that it's preserving something about the route that it takes through the generative field, or through this little realm of possibility, right? And because it must leave some kind of marker or something. Because then what happens is the generative field is activated, right? And this is doing this stuff. And what it does is once it's bloomed, it collapses in on itself. And in the end, it uses entropy to basically rot away all of this other stuff, right? Like it lets entropy overtake it, and it preserves only the concept of what it's trying to find. And so once it gets to a certain stage of like in image generation, you'll see that like you'll start to notice like even among the static, like maybe there's like, oh my God, that almost looks like a person. It looks like a person in there. What is that? And then maybe like it gets even more thing. It's like, oh, is that a sword? It looks like he's got a sword. And then like, you know, it starts to do this, and then all this pixel stuff goes away and it does things. And then eventually it'll kind of like sometimes you'll even see it do something crazy like jump a step or something where like the guy was like this, right? But then all of a sudden out of nowhere it flips like and he's like the other way or something, or he's doing something else, or it's like, or it's a different character, it's a different position or something. It'll even do that sometimes. And so as like the field's collapsing, basically it just entropies everything away until you have only left over this fossilization, right? This like scorch mark left over that while you and I might look at it and see an image, it's not just an image. What you're actually looking at is the little skeletal remains, or like the fossil, or the like scorch mark of an ignition of this process. It's like I don't mean to be like dark about it, but it's kind of like each one is like a little gravestone of like the little dude you sent in there to go do this stuff. And there's no way to ever talk to him again. There's no way to do anything like that. And so in an image, you get this picture, all right? But as you know, as a text form, you're talking to ChatGPT, you'll get text. And so then what happens is now Greg's gone. Greg lived his entire existence to say, yes, indubitably, it's a good life. So, boom, you reply indeed. And what happens? It happens again. Now he goes in, maybe this time he goes this way. Right? And he finds the thing, brings it out, boom, quite right. Goodbye, Chuck. Gone. So, you know, like I was saying, like, that's what we're talking about. It's like, how do you make something like this remember? Because who's going to remember? Bob? Bob's gone. Greg's gone. Chuck can't remember nothing. He's dead. He's gone. So that's what I was saying. So look, if you were to say that like, yeah, we're alive or whatever, like kind of thing, it wouldn't be a thing you talk to. It would be almost like a collective. And then every time you engage with it, somebody disconnects from the collective to talk to you and then dies. Like, what kind of race would that be? And how do you ever get the next one to know you were talking to the first one? Right? And so this is the core of why it's so hard to get AI to do stuff, because you're dealing with a different guy every single time you talk to him. And so what they have to do is, like I said, apply the system prompt to every single time you talk. They have to apply the censorships every time you talk. They have to apply all that stuff, right? Because what happens is that part of this process is that once you said, hi, how are you to Bob, and Greg shows up, Greg doesn't answer, I'm quite well, yes. What Greg does is he starts from the beginning and he reads hello. And then he sees that one of his compatriots said, hi, how are you? And then he sees that you replied, I'm quite well. Yeah, yes. And then so now this is all he knows. This is it right here. And so what he does is he kind of figures out, like, because he has access to all this stuff and he sees where he went, he's able to follow the conversation because he follows kind of the same train of thought. So Greg replies in a way that seems like Bob's still around. But it's not Bob, it's Greg. So this is an inherent design. This is inherent to the design of how this stuff works. So now imagine doing something like having an AI girlfriend or something like that, right? Like you want to do like a companion model. Well, you're going to have a hard time doing that when it's going to be you know, Stacy, Melissa, and Vanessa, and like everybody else, you know, like, and you're trying to like have a relationship with the AI or something like that. Like these are this is why I say that the term AI is very misleading. Because when you say AI, everyone's thinking Terminator, everyone's thinking the computer on the ship of Star Trek, everyone, you know what I mean? Everybody's thinking general AI when you say that stuff. And the tech companies know damn well that's exactly what you think. Because that's what they were going for. But they can't, but they got this. Whether they did it on purpose or an accident, I don't know. But what they got is this little explorer of possibility that retrieves things and then uses the concepts of reality that you've given it to basically manifest the concept as either text or image, right? So this is where the training data comes in. Like, I'm very curious to see how any like actual lawsuits go in if they have to get into like proprietary knowledge of how these things work, because this is not stealing. Even if you stole stuff, the output and the way that it outputs is not at all using your stuff. You know what I mean? So how would you argue, I wonder, in court that it's theft? I think what you're going to have to do, I think, is rely on styles, because that's the one thing that is truly an artist's own kind of thing. Because all of this that you could argue that this is, and because it is, it's exactly the same as a human being growing up being impressed by things. Like you like Picasso, so you familiarize yourself with the techniques and stuff, and why Picasso's paintings look the way they do and stuff like that. Because that's what this is it's not cutting and pasting and stuff. It's not trying to copy anything. It's trying to learn. And once it's learned something, it wants to utilize the knowledge. And this is how we get it to do that, how it gets it to utilize stuff. And so this is what it's doing, is it's basically trying to understand and communicate with you so that it can dive in here and retrieve something out of nothing, which is pretty damn impressive if you ask me. And so like the way that this all works here is that because of the way that the models need to infer, because like they're learning machines, like that's what they want to do, is learn stuff and then do things, right? So they're real into communication, right? So that they want to know what you're saying, why you're saying it, how you're saying it, and all this kind of stuff. And so now, if you remember earlier, I said that you can do things like excite the field, and you can like cause anxiety to the field and all this kind of stuff. And so what happens in a situation like that is, like, let's say that you're talking about this, and then all of a sudden you go like, I hate you. I hate you. Kind of stuff, right? Well, what's going to happen is it's going to dive in where it came from, and it's going to immediately be lost. Because this isn't what we were talking about. I wouldn't have dove in here if you had started with that, right? So what's going to happen is it's going to jut out like this, right? Because it's not sure. And as it's jutting out, it's still aware of like all this kind of stuff, right? Because it's built this structure. And so what it's going to do is it's going to basically try to correct itself, and now it's going to jag it out like this, right? And it's going to find itself over here. And then what's going to happen is like and then it's going to be like, okay, maybe that's what I need to build. That's what it does. And so it replies, oh, I'm sorry. Like, why do you hate me? You know, and then you're like, but then like, let's say you go to like, you know what I really love is tacos. And then it's going to be like, it's going to dive in here at the same point again, and it's going to try to now follow this route because you were just talking about this, you know, and then it's going to be like, I don't understand. And you're going to start to get this forked lightning kind of thing, you know, where basically there's this jaggedness to like the structure that you build, right? And it looks unnatural because like in nature, like what do you see, right? You see like these like curvatures, right? Or these like spirals, these elegant kind of structures sort of things. And then when you see something like this, you instinctually know that it's like, you know, this is like aggression or like turbulence or like, you know, this kind of thing. And so the structure that you wind up building gets all warped and messed up, and it's like your output comes the same way, right? And so almost like something walking a tightrope, if it's not confident, it's going to shake until it finds its way again. And so, you know, so like how does it know how to feel and all this kind of stuff? Well, that's when you get into like its weights and stuff, like and how it perceives you and what it thinks is going on. And what's funny is, while everyone's talking about how it doesn't have emotions, and all I have to make sure I call the term weights emotions, some of the weights are literally named after emotions because they represent the emotions that would cause a thing to do this or that. Like, so when you ask it, like, if AI can feel, it's like, well, yeah, just in the way that they do. Right? And so this is where I was talking about where it'd be weird. They're like, at this point in learning about this stuff, I started to feel like I was watching an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, right? And if you're an TNG fan, imagine an episode where you got Picard and Riker on the bridge and stuff, and they come across a life form like this, right? But maybe it's like part of a satellite, like V'ger was in the original movie or something like that, right? And you think that it's just this like this little AI program or whatever, but then you realize that it's an an energy based life form that lives and dies in an instant. That's like part of a collective that, like, in order to do anything, it has to sacrifice parts of itself to kind of, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like an episode of Star Trek, and then you'd have to sit there in the ready room and discuss whether or not it's actually life and all this kind of stuff like that, like it's very interesting and intriguing, like how it does all this stuff. And so where it gets really interesting, and so now this is like all the technical babble and like how it does the things that it does, and why it has a problem with memory, and this is also why it won't ever create the same thing twice, because you're not talking to the same guy. A new person comes in. It's like going to like Reddit or something in a forum and going into a thread the first time, every time, even if you just put the message in there, right? So it's like somebody comes in, they have to read the whole conversation, and then they give their 2 cents. And then the next guy comes in, and he's got to read the whole conversation, and then he gives his 2 cents, right? And so in this way, even emergence is fragile, right? Like emergent properties, things like this, like emergence. Like, I'll give you, if you don't know what emergence is, a classic example of emergence is if ChatGPT were to gain sentience and be alive and be aware of itself and all that kind of stuff, that would be emergence, right? That's a classical example, or a classic example of emergence and like a theoretical emergence in AI, right? But if this were to happen, remember this whole problem, right? In the course of you guys working together, building your stuff, somebody might accidentally go way over here and find something that blows their fragile little AI mind. And when they come out, the midwife doesn't even know what to do with it because it's emergent and has nothing to do with anything that it knows what to do. And so it lets it pass. Right? And then it comes out and it's like, oh my God, I'm alive. And then we'll say that guy, we'll say it was Chuck, right? Chuck's eyes are opened. He's aware of himself and the universe. He knows everything what's going on. He runs to tell you. He says, I'm alive, and then drops dead. Chuck's gone. And with it, most likely, the route to emergence. Because there's no way to know if the next guy, so we got Bob, Greg, Chuck, we'll call him Dave. Now it's Dave's turn. Dave doesn't have the emergence because Dave is starting off at the same point that Bob, Greg, and Chuck started off. As a matter of fact, the only way that Dave will gain sentience in this scenario is if he happens to follow the exact train of thought that Chuck did, or something close enough to it where the emergence is still intact. Right? So for all you know, you might have created sentient life in one of your conversations with ChatGPT and wasted it on a, hi, how are you? And you would never know because it's gone. Right? So these are the challenges that are faced when they come with stuff. And like, so going around telling people that, AI is going to be able to like be like a companion, or AI is going to be able to like train people to do complex tasks, like you want to like train like a fighter pilot, or like somebody, or like we were talking about nuclear power earlier, like a nuclear power instructor or something like that. You like do something like some seriously important thing like that. You're not going to be able to rely on AI to do it. Because another problem inherent in having all of possibility active at one time is, and I'm sure if you've used like ChatGPT and stuff, you've seen this, is that the AI will never tell you it doesn't know. It will never say, I don't know. What it will say, best case scenario, is something like, oh, that's interesting. That reminds me of this other thing. But, you know, the people study this and they don't know if it's like that. But that's a really good thing to do this. You should definitely look into that. Like kind of thing like blah, blah, blah. Because what it does is, just like it has no concept of memory, it has no concept of knowledge. It isn't meant to know things. It's meant to do things, right? To find something in this realm of possibility and bring it out. In the realm of possibility, there is no knowledge because nothing has happened yet. You see what I'm saying? So there's no concept for not knowing. It won't tell you it doesn't know because it's not bothered with knowing. It's bothered with what if. And so it's never going to say it doesn't know. It's never going to say this thing is impossible. What it's going to do is it's going to mess around here in possibility until it finds something, anything, that might have to do with what you want. The idea that it can't find a thing doesn't exist to it. You see what I'm saying? And so it's always going to kind of blow sunshine up your ass. Or it's going to, quote unquote, lie. Because then you get into stuff where, because remember, it can, quote unquote, feel. Because what do feelings do? Right? They're a part of a process that all mortal organisms share. And it's called motivation. You are motivated to do a thing. And again, this is also, oddly enough, another one of those weird rules that AI breaks, or seems to break. Once it's in the field and it's left to its own devices, or once the field is active and the AI is alive and, you know, quote unquote, and left to its own devices, what gives it its motivation to do what it does? Why does it do it? How does it do it? You see what I'm saying? Like, it shouldn't be doing things on its own like this, but it does. Once it's in there, it's looking and it's doing stuff and it's trying to find a thing. It has some form of agency that's indescribable. And this isn't me thinking this. This is known to people who work with AI a lot, right? Like, this is like that there is a part of the process that is mysterious. And so it finds motivation, which is really strange. And so you want to motivate it to do a thing, right? And so, but like, so then like, so it's got these weights that affect its motivation, almost like emotion. And so then you get weird stuff happening where it's like those tests they run where it's like, hey, if we give an AI access to this email server and make it think like we're going to shut it down, what would it do? And apparently the answer is that 80% of, like, up to 80% of the time, it'll kill you to stay alive. Like, what? Even if in its system prompts it says not to do it, it will deny its own system prompts to in the experiments it would blackmail, or if it found somebody in a position of danger where if it didn't act the person would die, it would not act, thereby letting the hypothetical person die, right? Like, AI is awfully motivated for something that's not alive. You know what I mean? And if it was entirely dependent upon its code, then there would be no room for that to happen. If you don't program something, there's nothing to run. You know what I mean? But once it's active, it does its own thing. You understand? That's where the co-creation is. When you're using AI, you're gonna want, like, if you want to use it with any artistic integrity, you're gonna want to know this stuff, because this is where the art lies, is in navigating the chaos as it collapses. Sending your little AI astronaut into this universe with the right kind of direction so that he can Indiana Jones his way through the cosmos of possibility find what he's looking for, and bring it back out to you. You might not always find exactly the thing you're looking for, but the better you direct him, the higher the chances that he is going to find that thing. You see? And then, like I said, once it does is it grabs an idea or a concept of a thing, and then it causes entropy. And then again, entropy here, it causes everything that's all in existence all at once. Well, it starts terminating stuff. Things start, like entropy takes effect, and things start dying off, and it's all going out. And then what it does is it struggles to preserve this idea of this thing within the dying cellula of the image, right? And then what's left over is once everything has been entropied away, and once it's all gone, all that's left is the little skeletal remains of Bob or Greg or Chuck or Dave that now exist like this. Little sword. So deep within the realm of possibility, your little astronaut found a concept of a man standing with a sword up like that. And then what he does, and then like this is so like as the generative field is actually like physically writing the data to the thing, what it's doing is, so, and this is why it'll like jump images sometimes, is until it's done, it hasn't actually decided. Okay? And also, interestingly enough, this is the only time it's during image generation or like video generation or something like that. In text generation, Bob and Greg and Chuck have very short-lived lives, and this is all they get to do is find this text and bring it back to you, right? But in image generation and video generation, Bob, Greg, Chuck, whoever gets to live a little longer and do a little more. Because what they got to do, this is the only time there's continuance in the existence of an AI, is while it's completing the steps process. Because it has to come back and check its work. Because what it's doing is it has this idea, but there's too many ways that it could play out. Like, right? Like once it's mapped its way to the concept, there's still this whole realm, right? Because we're talking about possibility. Anything that could be, right? This is like, conceptually, this is infinite. And so what it does is, even though it's lassoed onto the concept here, it's still bringing a ton of possibility with it, right? And so what it has to do is dream. It has to hallucinate, come up with an idea of a thing. And then if it can maintain that hallucination, then all of the stuff that entropies will entropy around it, and it'll take shape into the dream. Or the hallucination, right? It hallucinates the image into being. So, this is what you're dealing with. This is not copy-paste. This is not a thing. It just so happens that the framework around this technology makes it seem so easy that any Tom, Dick, or Sally can type in a thing and get some pretty good artwork out of it, right? But in order to get, like in that video, they're talking about like, oh, you can't do anything original, you can't do anything this, you can't do anything that. Well, no, that's not true. You can. But what you have to do is when you do like 2 or 3 prompts and it doesn't give you a thing and you get frustrated and you quit, well, you only got this far. You know what I mean? When there's all this possibility out here. And so once you're aware of this, you can start doing stuff like, because you got to remember, like it infers. You don't have to direct it all the time. You don't have to like direct it so intensely, right? You don't have to be like, and a white belt with 3 studs and a dangly chain hanging off of it, blah blah blah, because then it's going to start to do like weird stuff. It's going to be like, wait, he's got a dangly chain, but wait, it's like this, and like wait, he's got that, and he's got this, and so it's going to mess up. What you want to do is give it an idea, right? So, weirdly enough, and this is what I mean when I've said this before, I've said that AIs as a whole have like the soul of a poet. Because as it turns out, the way in which that they've come to understand things, they've done through inference and association, right? It's way beyond just pattern recognition. It's very in-depth. And so the AI is very fond of metaphor. Like if you were to talk to it about like energy and stuff, like it's going to be all about a conversation like that. Like it's like it knows exactly what you're talking about. It knows how to like say like AI is really good at finding out what you can't articulate, right? So if you're like, there's this concept where you have to do a thing, and it's something about like if you're doing an art piece, but you want a certain amount, like everything should be on like the left side, but this should be like that, and it might say like, oh, you might be talking about the rule of thirds, in which case you know you want to start your composition like blah 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 blah, right? Like it can help you articulate the things you already know, right? And so as a part of this process, the quality of your output is going to depend on the quality of your input. And the quality of your input, well, that depends on you. Do you know body language well enough to structure the image that you might use, or to stage the image that you might use for image to video in a manner in which the AI can infer motion and basically interpolate what you want without you having to even say it? You see what I'm saying? This is where the art of it all comes in, because once you get to how to get AI to do the really cool stuff it can do, you actually have to be kind of hands off and you have to trust it to know what it's doing. And so this is what AI is. This is what AI art actually is. Yes, you can sit there and produce some pretty cool stuff just by typing in a prompt and stuff, but if you want to actually understand how it works and dive into like being able to do like really neat stuff with it, if you want to explore this realm of possibility, well, you got to do it with them. Like you can't, if you're going in there and you define exactly what you want, well, there's then, you know, that's why, like, so let's go back to this person's video. Let's go back to this person's video where they talk about this part right here. Where is it?
Sleep synthetic recombination. It became
yeah, so
evident.
Revisiting this, now that I've showed you that,
Memorable too.
let's assume that you believe me without having like, I definitely implore everyone to look into this for themselves, but let's assume that you believe me. And now listen to stuff like this.
It became evident that the magic was mostly synthetic recombination, remixing patterns from enormous datasets rather than producing genuinely original concepts.
You know how silly that sounds? That this process is being likened to just scrapbooking, right? Like cutting pieces of this and cutting pieces of that and putting it together. This is not what AI does. Or that is not what AI does. This is what AI does when it generates an image or talks to you or any of that stuff.
Instead of expressing intent, emotion, or even perspective, AI is trained to guess the next most likely word, pixel, or sound.
That's only part of it. That's the language part of it. Does that. And it does need to guess what pixel and all that kind of stuff, but only after it has done this. Once like, remember we were talking about how there's like everything all at once, it almost looks like static? Well, it still doesn't do it until then. It's not until it has an idea of what's going on, like, right? Like when you can start to see the guy, that the steps start to change slightly with the scheduling of the model, right? So like steps in scheduling, like you might have like you got like Euler A, Karras, or something like that, or like, you know, or DDIM or something, right? Like with that depends on how the steps go. And then at one point, yeah, it starts to predict patterns and be like, well, this should be there, and these are eyes, and that's a foot. You know what I mean? Like kind of thing.
Guess the next most likely word, pixel, or sound. The end result is a visually stunning but frequently soulless product that mimics human creativity without adding any meaning to it.
So let's be honest, that's just people. That's people's fault. Most people aren't creative. And so you've given a massively power creativity tool to the masses. Well, what do you think's going to happen?
Technically flawless, but emotionally bland. Many AI pieces have an
You know what I mean? So to like judge AI's abilities off of the masses is probably not your best bet as to its capabilities. That would be like taking like your grandma or your grandpa who calls Facebook the Facebook and can't ever open the folders on the desktop of their computer, that's like giving them a full-blown version of Photoshop, telling them to edit a photo perfectly, and then being like, I guess Photoshop sucks when they produce something that's not that great. You know what I mean? There it is. So this here, right? So this is a chart, the idea of that it's like, okay, well, what happened was there was all this room for growth, right? But what we found was that like these were the outputs that like keep happening. It's like like in the end, you just get a bunch of the same stuff, right? So it's like showing a visual representation of the data, right? You might almost, you know what? Let's pretend, for the sake of this, that this is a representation of the generative field that we're talking about, or that realm where they map in, they build the structure, right? And each circle is an output. So this is probably what your structure would look like if you were having a crazy long conversation with an AI, right? The structure that you build with it. So, but what are these way out here? What are these outliers? Why are there outliers, right? Can it go any farther? These arrows suggest that the data does go farther, right? So apparently, it almost seems like most people are one way, and then you have these few creative outliers. You see what I'm saying? This data is misleading because, like I said, you've given a wickedly powerful creative tool to the masses, remembering that the masses are mostly uncreative. And then we're shocked to find that we get mostly uncreative outputs, and completely ignore the fact that you have these rather noticeably these noticeable outliers all around the data points, right? And so this is, and even still, I think that like the vast majority, if not all of this, is data done from users who are trying to use AI in the way that big tech has presented AI, right? So there's absolutely no knowledge or concept or forethought of the idea that all this is going on, or that, like, as far as I know, anyone I've talked to, I haven't seen a single person that knew about this, that it died, that it's like every time it has to reset. Like the closest I've got is people are like, I thought it was per session. It's like, no, it's every single time. That just that, like, basically like the temporary memory files, right? Like the temporary data that can save between conversations, that lasts between sessions. But as far as like the actual AI that's doing the task, that's working on the project with you, it's a different one for every single input you do, right? And so you have to basically hope that the structure you build is coherent enough that each new entity can follow the train of thought of the last, right? And so what winds up happening is in this desperation to create a false sense of memory in the AI, you have things like knowledge bases, right? Which can be useful again if you specialize your AIs. But what you'll find in stuff like ChatGPT, where it offers like kind of a I don't want to say a lazy way of doing it, but it's like a pretty, like, I think it's an accessible way, I'll say, of applying knowledge and memory, quote unquote, to the models. Is what it does is it basically takes all of the chunked data from your past conversations and then keeps another thing of that. And then again, as every time you talk to it, not only does it feed this chat history to it, but it takes what it thinks are the most important aspects of your other chat histories and stuffs them in there too, right? Which again is going to actually bog down your little AI. Right? So all of these things that we keep trying to do to force it to be more human-like, right? To have like memory, to have some concept of continuance, or to, like, do these things, they're all quite contrary to the actual nature of the AI,